Hello legends, this is Papanikolis and welcome to our pod. We had many questions about robbing, so we tried to put as many as possible. Thank you for the support and we hope to enjoy this special episode as much as we did.
Hello everyone and welcome back to World of Warships Back to Port with myself, RoguePLC, and our famous guest, the top of the line players and a wargaming employee himself, the Sailing Robin. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you. Good morning, good evening, and welcome to the Back to the Port podcast. And thank you very much for having me here, Rogue.
We are so happy that you actually made some time to join us. I mean, you're a very busy guy, and having this moment with you is going to be a huge privilege, not just myself, but I think for all the audience that's going to be listening to this podcast today.
Well, that's good. I mean, I'm happy to be here as well. It is the first podcast I'm actually making as a community manager for Legends. So for me, it's also a pretty interesting experience. So I think we have a couple of positive things to share on both sides here. You're happy to have me here, and I'm happy to be there too. So can only go well at this point.
It's all downslope from here until we get to the questions, of course. Well,
I'm ready. Hit me.
All right, let's go. Well, if you could maybe just tell us a little about yourself and maybe how you started with the whole wargaming thing. How did you end up with wargaming itself?
Sure. Well, that's going to be an interesting story. Most of the community who really knows me may already know that story a little bit, but I have no issue telling it again. Well, let's start again with the basic for people who don't know me. My name is Robin, alias is the Sailing Robin. It's both my work name, my community name, and the name of my personal YouTube channel, which is essentially content for World of Warships, both PC and console. So yeah, my name is Robin, I am 26 years old, and currently I am working for Wargaming as community manager for World of Warships Legends. The way I got involved with wargaming, and I say wargaming in particular because Legends was not really on the table back in the days. Before I worked for wargaming, I was basically working in different very low-grade jobs. I mean, it's already a mistake on my end, but it's not low-grade job. It wasn't jobs that were really fitting what I wanted to do. I don't really have a lot of studies. I don't really have a lot of background when it comes to school and so on and so forth. So I was working in catering, delivering sushis on scooters in my home city of Lyon in France, because I am a French person initially. And I was making already videos ever since 2016 about World of Warships PC. I was spending a lot of time outside of work playing the game, recording footage, editing some videos and putting them on YouTube, and I was engaging with the community there on my free time, essentially. And for a few years, I think it was 3 years, until probably the end of, more or less around the end of 2018. I've made a couple of videos that got really popular. They were just some kind of funny montage and so on and so forth. And one of the person you know, which is Tikane, Christian, my direct colleague, which is also community manager for Legends, he was also a big PC player, and he was watching my videos, and he left a comment on the YouTube section of that video. I believe it was the Des Moines montage, that said that the entire Prague studio watched the video and enjoyed it. And at the time, if I put myself in that place mentally again, it was not fun, because I was, in this kind of work which wasn't really interesting for me, and I was really trying to get out of that spot and just trying to find something better, potentially in video editing and so on and so forth. And I was really in that mental state when he left that comment, and for me it ticked, and I was like, what if I could have some kind of partnership, or what if I could try to get myself into the video game industry? Because if I have somebody from that industry who comes into my YouTube and says that he enjoyed what I'm doing, there might be an opening, if you know what I mean. So I went into contact with him on Facebook, and I've asked if there was anything we could do about it. And he directed me to the community contributor program of PC back at the time. And I refused, because in my head, I was aware of what the community contributor program was on PC, and I knew I didn't have the time to really put myself into playing the game more and uploading more. Because back in the days, I was uploading a video once every 2 weeks. My upload schedule wasn't super high. So for me, I wasn't looking to continue that thing. I wasn't looking to keep working in catering or restaurants while doing more videos to maintain myself in the program, or so on and so forth. Even though the program is not demanding, that was my mindset back in the day. I thought I had to get really involved to maintain it, which is false, but still, it was the way I was thinking. And instead of accepting the CC program, I've asked what was their recruitment policy and if they were looking for any talents in anything, basically. And here comes Christian Canna that sends me an application form for a French/English community manager position in the upcoming title of Wargaming, which is World of Warships Legends. So dare I say, it was actually fantastic timing because I literally applied 2 days before the vacancy got deprecated and I went through all the interviews and yada 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 and I got selected. So it was happy times, moved to Prague, and that's essentially how I started. A mix of luck and pursuing my endeavor, which was creating videos and basically already being both feats in this world, which is, you know, World of Warships and gaming. So that's like a happy ending kind of story, and then I moved to Prague, and here I am.
Well, yeah, that's quite a story. I'm quite sure a lot of people would actually not know this, because most of the people that normally tune in are people that are quite new to the game. So it's a very good thing that they understand where you come from and where you've ended up and the path you took, which is very interesting from what I hear. Now, it's amazing. It's really amazing.
It is, yeah. It's also a story I like to come back to, because in a way it kind of proves that you don't need to have like a perfect path to be able to get something you want or achieve some goals. You just need to be, I mean, I was lucky as well, but the only constant thing is that I was pursuing my goals by doing what I loved, and doing what I loved was making videos and playing that game and partaking in that community, which I believe is one of the best in the gaming industry. We'll get back to that at a later time.
Being at CM, I mean, I know you guys have got a lot of work. I know you've got a small team, but in a nutshell, try and explain to the people out there what does your job as a community manager entail on let's say on a daily basis?
I mean, I can answer that question at multiple levels. The public known principle of a community manager is, well, to manage the community. That goes with the title. It's going to be engaging with them on social media, making sure that every questions regarding the product, I'm going to call Legends the product because that's the internal term for it. Just make sure that the customers, so you guys, the community, has the best communication possible with the product itself, which is, you know, answering questions about the gameplay, getting transparency on mechanics, especially for a video game that is, let's say, as complex as Legends when it comes to mechanics, and essentially being entertaining as well, because the goal of a video game is to be entertaining. And if you have a community team which can also entertain their community on top of the video game, it's a win-win situation. Now, of course, it's not only suns and flowers. It does come with a lot of background job that most of the community isn't quite aware of. That's okay, because it's not something we want to, expose, even if we don't have anything bad against exposing it. But a lot of work comes into gathering the feedback, getting into communication with our developers, having a very professional and flushed out way of communicating with the community. That means creating online activities, creating giveaways, making sure everything happens smoothly, making sure that the information we give to the community is correct, and essentially there's a lot of preparation time. When we release an update, for example, we are already working for the next one, so we already have methods in place towards the next update when it comes to plenty of things. That's development, that's also activities for the community, and so on and so forth. So my daily job, even though it has changed now because we'll get to that later as well. I am going to switch position within the company to move towards a more video production job rather than community manager. But my daily job for the last two and a half years were essentially sharpening my skills as a CM, getting my image out there, and trying to build the community together as much as possible on all social media. So essentially, my daily job is I come in the morning at around 9 a.m. I'm gonna gather some feedback, see what the activity was on social media, because most of our users are in the US, so most of the feedback and interaction we get happen when we're sleeping here in Prague. So it's gathering all that, and then the rest of the afternoon is going to be preparing everything for next update, and that's scheduling PSAs, which are public service announcement, just your normal posts you have on Reddit or you have on every other social media. It's going to be planning activities, planning streams, all the planification that goes around this. So in communication with the art team to provide with art assets, preparing streams, because there's also the whole stream element, which is, getting our real faces out there and communicating with you guys in the most direct way, which is through streams, and a whole lot more tasks that I can't really talk about because it's internal stuff anyway. But yeah. And then we have big days like update days when we're going to focus the entire day or sometimes the entire week on just gathering feedback and trying to collect bugs and getting in touch with our developers on what the community wants, what the developers can come up with, and so on and so forth. So it is very interesting. There has not been one day for these last 2.5 years where I was bored or where I had nothing to do during my day. So it is pretty intense, to say the least, but also extremely fun and rewarding.
Saying that you're living in Prague now and coming all the way from France, has it been a lot of,
Yeah, I'm guessing what you're trying to ask is what was the difference, or was it hard to adapt essentially to the new life and the new country and so on and so forth? So essentially, yes and no. It was difficult to adapt, but at the same time, it was not the first time I was living in a different country. As a personal experience, my dad is from Ivory Coast, and I've been living in Africa, Ivory Coast, for 7 years, since I was 3 years old to all the way up to my 10 years old. So I was already a good part of my life living in a different country. I was born in France, in Lyon, and then when I was 3 years old, my mother had essentially a job offer in Ivory Coast, and we just went there for 7 years. But leaving France in beginning of 2019 was a bit, it wasn't difficult because I knew I was getting myself into a better life. I was getting a real job, in brackets. I say real because I had a real job, but I was getting a job that was like the first proper job I ever had, if I can say it that way. I was looking forward to it, so it really helped adapting to that new life. The second most difficult thing I would say would be the language. I was already quite fluent in English when I got the job, but I never in my life needed to speak English 24/7, because that's the work environment. Everybody speaks English, everything is getting carried in English. I do have a bit of French from time to time, interacting with the French community, but the vast majority of the job is in English. The second thing being is that in Prague, compared at least to France, and I'm going to be bashing a bit on the French people here, but it's okay because, hey, I'm French. French people usually don't speak English very well, or at least they'll be a bit distant when you approach them with English. Compared to Prague, where the majority of the people my age and even older, they're all going to have a very solid basis in English, which made life extremely easier, because after learning a few local words in Czech, just to introduce myself and then politely ask to switch to English, there was not a single occurrence of me struggling to carry on my daily life with everything. Regarding the language barrier. That was my number one fear, is that I would have to learn Czech, which I've yet to do after 2.5 years. So it just goes to show that you don't need to speak Czech to live in Prague, which for me was a massive bonus. It was a big plus. So there was that, and also the fact that Prague is a beautiful city. Stuff is very cheap when you come from Lyon because the currency is different. So for you, it feels like everything is cheaper, which is also an added bonus when you're moving from a country. I would say the number one thing that I'm missing from France is going to be the food and my family, because the vast majority of my family is, of course, in France. Though it's like an afternoon of travel to get back to Lyon, so it's not that bad. I'm not that far. It's not like I was traveling the world. I'm quite close to my home country anyway.
If you look at wargaming itself, well, yes, of course, you've got the love for the company itself and for the game. What is there any pros or cons in your line of work that, if you want to say?
Sure. In the work itself, pros and cons. Again, like I am a little bit biased in the way that I still really value this job as one of the best jobs I've ever had. So it's difficult for me to find cons, and the rare cons I ever found, I was able to overcome them very nicely because the pros outweighed them quite heavily. I would say if I really have to put pointers on the cons, would be again the initial language barrier I had to overcome at the start. And potentially the fact that you need to... when I joined the company, I needed to grow myself as a person to be able to adapt to being the face of a company, because it does put a bit of stress on you when you have to physically represent a company through social media, put your personality out there, and there's a risk that people will not like you. And how do you react to that specifically? It's not coming from the company itself, it's coming from basic social human interactions where you're going to basically be facing adversity. That's why I want to come at. And we face adversity every day with some comments we get, and that's completely okay. Because we are, we're representing a game that some people like, some people don't, and there's a lot of topic around it every day regarding balance and so on and so forth. And the number one thing that you have to overcome as a CM is that you are the direct lifeline from the players to the game, because, well, you're the number one person they're going to address both their content, but most likely their frustration. So the initial thing was to try to adapt to this adversity and not take any negative things directly towards you, and try to take this in and turn it around to make it constructive. Like, okay, this player here really does not like the way the game is going, and he's not going to insult me directly, but he's going to go at it. He's going to have a good go at us, bashing us around and so on and so forth. And it's just about managing the salt levels essentially, and keeping that straight face. And that was the number one thing that was a little bit difficult for me to adapt to, even though in the end I really like the community, because they're not afraid of expressing their concern, and they do it in a pretty straightforward way, and the vast majority of the time they also do it in a very constructive way. So nowadays it's more like trying to forward to the developers what the community really needs versus what our team can physically come up with. And sometimes we have to deal with frustrations because we have the players that really wants a feature. We as players as well, and as community managers, we also want the feature as well. But our developers tell us that they don't have the time or the resource to do it, at least not in the immediate time. So it's all this process on telling the community as transparently as possible what can be done and what can't be done, and then dealing with all the frustration around this specifically. So yeah. I talked a lot about the cons here, but the pros the pros outweigh them, because the community is a fantastic one. Never I've seen people that engaged with a game, because there's all this historical aspect, there's this heritage aspect around it as well, and plus the game is pretty fun. And being a PC player for the last 4 years, I came to really enjoy that game and working in that universe where you have both online events on social media and offline events when you go and meet the player. That happened a few times since I was in the company. I had the chance of going back to France for a specific French event when I got to see real ships and so on and so forth. So it's all this enthusiasm around history, around what men can do in difficult situations. Of course, there's this entire aspect of war, but also the fact that all these stories are absolutely memorable, and it really drives you. There's something about the history of ships that shaped the world as well, when you think about it, that is just absolutely passionate. How do you say that? It is mind-blowing, yes. I'm sure you and most of the audience can understand that, and that's also why I would say most of our hardcore players played the game, is not only for the game itself, but also for this entire heritage that revolves around it. So yeah, one thing I also wanted to add regarding the pros and cons regarding the job, if we can get back to that question for a sec. One thing I wanted to add as a pro was the colleagues I work with, the persons I got with in my team, my superiors, my colleagues and all that stuff. I'm working with fantastic people that are equally passionate about the game and what they're doing. I'm working with professionals that really know their way around stuff. I'm working with people that are exceptional at teaching their job and among other things. I'm working with people who have years and years of experience in the video game industry, and that also have a lot of stories about that. So like when I said that there never was a day where I was bored during this last 200 years, this last 2.5 years, was also related to the fact that I am learning something every day from both the games, from both the community, and from the persons I have the privilege to work with. So this is something I really want to put an emphasis on, because at least in the past, my previous jobs were difficult, but the job was much more bearable because of the persons I was working with, because of my colleagues, because of the human interaction and the fact that humans, when they're together, they can overcome so much things. And I have the exact same feeling here. Granted, the job is less difficult than some of the jobs I had in the past. It's difficult on a different level, but most of the difficult situation we encounter in the current job as a CM or other people within the company, there is this entire human aspect where my colleagues are also my friends. So it's we do a lot of activities together. We stay in touch after work. We have a lot of common interests around plenty of stuff, and we live in the same city. So it really does help. We're just a bunch of people very passionate about stuff. And at all levels of hierarchy, there is this common passion about the game and common passion about what we're doing, and it really, really makes the job experience exceptional. I mean, it sounds like a massive praise, but I am not embellishing it whatsoever. I'm really truly speaking out of my heart here, because that's what I felt the last 2.5 years, and that's how it's going now, even better, because after 2.5 years working with the same people, you create bonds and your work experience improves, and there's all this whole shenanigans around that. So yes, pro number one would be the game itself, the community, and the heritage, and the story, and the background of everything related to Warships. The second one would be the colleagues and everything I just said. And the third one would be the location, Prague, which is a fantastic city. So,
especially with the veterans out there, a lot of nostalgia comes to when they play some of these ships that they actually had service on. There's some of them out there, I do believe so.
I've been approached by a lot of people saying that their father or grandfather worked, lived, or had the opportunity to visit or actually spend part of their life on these ships, or even died on these ships, and so on and so forth. And it's very touching, because it affects players on a personal and sentimental levels that not a lot of games actually manage to do. And that's one of the things that is quite spectacular when it comes to both titles on PC and console.
Well, you also mentioned that you are going to be changing positions within the company quite soon. What is that new position going to entail?
So there's no official title yet for it, but essentially I will be doing a whole lot of videos. If you've been watching the YouTube on the official Legends channel, the entire How It's Done playlist is done by me. It's my gameplay translated into video gameplay. Just recently I've started to make commentaries on this How It's Done. The last one I've done was, I believe, for the Makarov. A bit of the same format I do on my personal YouTube that I am now bringing up to the official channel. So it's a very fantastic opportunity for me, because I do what I love, which is playing the game and making videos about it, but now in an official manner for Legends itself. And also I'm behind a bunch of 2D arts, like the patch notes, screenshots, some of the arts you sometimes see on social media. And I would say the most important thing being the ship teaser you've been having for the last 2 years. It goes all the way down to when Alabama was announced for free XP. I've been doing these very short ship teasers that really hype up the community, and these are my own production as well. And just recently they've decided that I should be moving to a position where I would essentially do video production full time to keep that talent essentially dedicated to the YouTube channel and other social media. So
that's amazing. It is. It's going to be sad losing you. I wonder who's going to take your position up as CM.
I will still be around. I will still be around within the community. I will still engage with you guys. I will also be doing streams and so on and so forth. So I'm not completely stepping away from the community. But when it comes to who's going to replace me, that has yet been announced. So you'll see all that in the future.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's definitely. Well, there's a lot of community questions that we have to touch on, and if you won't mind, the first one comes from What's His Face 135, and he's asking, what's your favorite class or playstyle for solo and division play? Any tactical advice?
Okay. For me, it's going to be pretty straightforward. Number one is going to be light cruisers. Light cruisers because they have insane DPM, they have the speed to reposition themselves, positioning being one of the number one element, I think, in our game. If you position your ship correctly, you'll be successful 90% of the time. And any tactical advice regarding light cruisers and also destroyers, because of course light cruisers are easily deleted by battleships or other heavy cruisers if they mess up, is to use terrain, use island to your advantage, keep your eyes on the minimap at all time, and try to essentially, light cruisers with their very high DPM are going to be very strong into 1v1 scenarios. So try to put your ship in a position where you will only be facing one ship at a time, and then you just unleash your DPM on that ship in particular, and most of the time a light cruiser will win a 1v1 versus another light cruiser or another heavy cruiser if it can use island to its advantage. Of course it relies a lot on team spotting, because most of the time you're going to be behind an island, and if you don't have any teammate spotting for you, well, you're blind. But yeah, light cruisers because they have a lot of utility with radar, sonar, defensive AA, and the ability to dish out tons of damage and also reposition to help their team almost anywhere on the map at all times.
There's one from One Ping Only as well, and he says, two most important ones, this is stuff for himself. Then it's SAP, the underwater torps, aka for Pan-Asian DD line, a button for the AA on and off.
We can't really talk about. Regarding SAP, there's no plans to implement the ammunition. We've communicated that a lot of time. Italian cruisers currently are performing really good, and essentially developers basically hit a wall when trying to code in the ammunition. They can do it in a way, but I don't think that there's not that much incentive to add that ammunition to the Italian cruisers, because the way they perform right now and the way players approach cruiser play, removing high explosive from them to add an ammo that's not specifically reliable against all targets, which HE is not really worth it. So for now, SAP is a no-go. When it comes to buttons for on and off anti-air, It is something that we would really like to implement, but then we're faced with the fact that, well, we only have so much buttons on the controller, and we have to figure out how to remap that 5 times for 5 different presets. So it is very difficult to add a new button without sacrificing another feature which also needs these buttons to be in play. So we know it's a very demanded request from the community. We just have yet to figure out how we're going to do it with our current control presets. And then underwater torpedoes like Pennage and DD lines, there's no plans to implement them. That's as far as I can go with that.
There's another one from What's His Face 135, and I kept this one in for a good reason, as he says, in all seriousness, what is the process of troubleshooting bugs? Once they see a clip, now this is of course wargaming, and it looks fishy, what happens after that? Do they just email it to someone, or are they involved with the troubleshooting themselves?
Kind of both, actually. We check the bugs report a lot, because bugs are obviously something we do not want to have in our game. That's just gonna basically lower the quality of the player experience, and this is not something we want to have. So bugs are of course an important part. That's also something we do on our daily basis, is to check bugs. But we as players are also very good at knowing if it's a bug or not. Regarding mechanics, armor penetration, and so on and so forth. And most of the bugs we're going to see are either going to come from latency. We have a lot of users sending us clips of torpedoes going through ships, and it's just a latency issue on their end. They have a high ping, so the ship looks like he is in one position, but since everything is handled server side, client side is going to look bizarre to some extent. Whereas server side, well, that torpedo missed. So when we see bugs that really look fishy to us, we troubleshoot them ourselves. Like, we actually go into the game and try to replicate that bug and so on and so forth. And if we actually manage to replicate it, or if we really think that's an issue, then we'll forward it to the higher ups, that being Filip Glushakov, Filigula, and he'll then forward it to our devs, which are going to investigate themselves. So it's a pretty safe way to do things, but let's say 50% or 60% of the bugs we see are usually easily debunked, because it's either a latency issue or a gameplay feature that the player is not aware of. Is going to think it's a bug. Hey, how come I'm overpainting a broadside Leander even though I aimed at the Citadel? And there's a mechanic in game that actually allows you to overpen the Citadel if your fuse time is too long, if your penetration is too high, and so on and so forth. So there's the perception of a bug, and there's the actual mechanic that debunks it. So there's that story.
Well, there's a old friend of mine, Tiger. He's asking more about the anime girls out there. And he's also asking if you're a man of culture. When it comes to the anime.
Oh boy. Well, I'm a man of culture in a way that everybody is a weeb. It just depends on if you want to acknowledge it or not. I honestly don't mind. I don't mind weeb stuff. But regarding are they going to overhaul the brawler commander skill and make them viable? Well, when it comes to skill balance for captains. But yeah, when it comes to commander skills, we really keep a close eye on it, because we have a lot of skills. Like, I believe we have over 500, maybe not that much, but we have at least 300 different skills in the game right now, with all these commanders and so on and so forth. And as most people know, the skills in our game are the #1 modifiers for ships. So every time we touch something, especially when it comes to skills, there can be massive repercussions on balance. So every time we have a suggestion to change, buff or nerf a skill, we really have to pay attention to how we tackle this, because ever so slightly changing one skill can have massive repercussion due to the impact they have in the first place. So it is a topic that we really want to pay close attention to, but most of the time, when a skill is performing correctly and is not either too strong or too weak, it's not going to change. It's going to stay as it is. So that's that.
Well, B-Man2128. Why can't we have night maps like PC, even though it's a mod?
That's purely for user experience. Night maps obviously tend to be dark. and if you have issues seeing a ship, then you can't shoot at it even if it's displaying correctly in the game, and so on and so forth. PC has the access to modding, which we currently don't have for various reasons. Modding on console has to go through a whole lot of legal procedures that PC doesn't quite have. There's a lot of user-end mods on PC that people can just run on their PC, and as long as it doesn't give them an advantage, it will be okay to use. Whereas console, it's difficult. It's difficult to mod a game on console. It's been something that is broadly known. Some games have tackled it, we haven't yet. But for maps, for night maps specifically, it is directly linked to the fact that having night maps could be fun, maybe for a special mode, if you can shoot flares in the sky and so on and so forth. But introduce it as a permanent gameplay element is not viable, because we want players to be able to play a game without, because some people may not like it. Some people may dislike night maps entirely. I can't see anything. It's dark. I'm playing the game on my living room, which is very bright, and my kids are watching something on the other hand, and the kitchen is lit up. It's reflecting on my screen. I can't see anything. I'm giving a weird example here, but it is an example that exists, and we kind of want to stay away from that.
Flying Dutchman. Yeah. He's been within the community for a very long time. I know him as well. Since you've played both PC and console, what is your opinion in the biggest difference between the aircraft carriers on PC and that on console? Because a lot of people seem to have a big issue with them on console at the moment.
Well, when it comes to carriers, you can't have a discussion around carriers without coming down to balance and without it being controversial. I would say, though, the main difference between PC carriers and Legends carriers is tied to the 9 versus 9 matchmaking versus the 12 versus 12 matchmaking. On PC, carriers have a much bigger impact and are quite more powerful because they have to deal with 12 ships rather than 9. If you put PC carriers into a 9 versus 9 environment, they would be much stronger. And that's why Legends carriers are rather toned down when it comes to their strike power and so on and so forth. My take on it is that currently the way Legends carriers are very good, honestly, having played PC. I've been advocating as a personal point of view. I am not a fan of carriers, let's be honest. It has been out there, people know I'm not a fan of it, but I've came to grown used to them in a way, because I feel like the main frustration around CVs is that players do not want to adapt. They want to keep playing in a way they know works, and every change that happens in the game makes them essentially get out of their comfort zone. And CVs do that in a rather drastic fashion, which I find personally frustrating as well, but I've grown to adapt to them and accept them in essentially the fighting environment of a battle. So my take on it is that they're currently fine the way they are. We're really keeping a close eye on the balance. I know there's all the discussion currently around evasive maneuvers and all that kind of stuff. We're very aware of the community's take on it, and we know that CVs are a controversial topic in the first place. But if you really come to my take, they're doing fine, and you, like players and myself, we need to adapt to the way they are, change our playstyle to accept them, and when you do, it's not that big of a deal to deal with a CV. I've done my share of CV clubbing, if the term can exist, speccing a Fantask with full concealment and striking a CV at the beginning of the match and so on. There's lots of work around them in a pure gameplay perspective. Now, when it comes to balance, we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. It is, we keeping a very close eye on it, and we as CM are forwarding an unhealthy amount of feedback to our devs for them to compile and take into account. So we'll see what the future has to hold for us.
Guys and Nuts is asking, what sparked your interest in history, especially naval history and warships? If you could bring back any ship that was lost or destroyed during World War I or World War II as a modern day museum ship, what ship would it be?
That's a very interesting question. Yeah, I really like that one from Kaisernuts. The first one, what sparked my interest in history, and specifically naval history, I didn't personally came looking for it. Essentially, when I started playing the game back in 2015, I thought the game was fun. I wasn't quite looking at like, hey, it's warships, I'm really passionate about warships. No, it was more like the tactical element of it, getting to work around islands, and just, it was fun to shoot ships and destroy more ships. What really got me into the history of it and the heritage aspect of it was the people I met throughout my playtime. And like, I've met good friends back when I was playing PC, friends I'm still in contact with, that were also not history nuts and so on and so forth, but diving into that history, playing the game, and slowly but surely getting to know this massive world, which is, history of ships and so on and so forth, and meeting people that were actually passionate about it was basically contagious. I've met a bunch of people that I work with that really knew their stuff about ships, and when they talk about warships and their history, you just listen to them because it's so interesting. Essentially, the most direct example would be Prince Blip, which is CM for us as well, and he knows a bunch of stuff regarding ships, and every time he starts talking about this, he reminds me of the reason why I love this universe, is that because there's so much stories, again, back from what we were talking about a few minutes ago. There's so much story and heritage around this that it's not something you can ignore when you hear about it. It really piques your curiosity. And when you really look at the ships and how they worked, they are still marvels of human conceptions, because they're both, machines of war, obviously, but they're also homes to people. They also have, they are part of the lives of thousands of people, from the people who designed them, the people who built them, the people who commanded them, and all the histories that goes with and without them, like what they achieved, what they failed to achieve, the impact it had on our modern life at this time as well. So it's not something you can ignore. When it comes to ships I would bring back from World War I or World War II as a modern day museum ship, it would essentially be Richelieu. As a French person, we don't like the US has a lot of museum ships from World War II. They have a lot of battleships, cruisers, destroyers, submarines. Like, they have a lot of that because they managed to either save these ships that were not sunk in the first place, and back in the days they also maybe had the economical power to actually maintain these ships as museum ships, which France didn't. Most of the ships we had in World War II got either sunk, scuttled, or just sold for scraps at the end of the war or after that. So yeah, it would be the Richelieu. I would have loved to have at least one big surface ships from France in World War II. And I would have been a battleship, obviously, because they're the most attractive warships when you think about it. Big guns and all that stuff. So yeah, Richelieu for sure.
Here's one from OddGamer3983, but I'm gonna it's quite a large chunk of a question. So I'll maybe just make it a bit smaller. Will we ever see interactive maps? And he's also asking about submarines, which I think is a no-go.
Okay, well, submarines, let's get them out of the way. They haven't even yet been released on PC. There's absolutely no plans to bring them to consoles. Once again, we can never say never, but as it stands, subs are a no-go indeed. Though, when it comes to interactive maps, as I dig a bit deeper in the question now, he's kind of referring to the old Bastion mode that existed on PC, where you could enter a zone and it would like trigger like a radar on islands, or it would trigger like some kind of fortifications and so on and so forth. If you look back, we have a lot of frustration around stuff that isn't controlled by the players, like anti-air or secondaries and so on and so forth. Players get frustrated when the control of these mechanics are not in their hands. And the entire principle of interactive map or the Bastion mode was that these things were not controlled by the players. The radar was kind of passive, the Bastion shooting at ship was an AI. So we kind of took a lesson from that Bastion mode, and anything that isn't going to be directly controlled by the player, is going to be difficult to implement and not worth all the time and the sweat to add them in, essentially. So we're kind of staying away from this as a better safe than sorry principle, basically.
JFK 194, that's 194547. So sorry, JFK, for that. Do you have any plans to add historical ship captains in the future? Collaborations is not a bad idea, but I would like to see a bit more historical military personnel given as options.
So that's a fair speculation to say yes. We already have a bunch of historical commanders added in. That's kind of the backbone of Legends in the first place, is the legends of these captains. That's also why one of the most impacting gameplay elements are the captains and their skills. So we already are in this mindset of having historical figures. Every single non-collaboration or non-event commanders that are in the game are actual persons that existed. They may have not been commanding the warships you put them on, naturally, but if we add more nations in the future, it's definitely a good speculation to have. So I would say yes, we have plans to add more historical ship captains in the future. Now the question is, can these persons be added in our game without creating any kind of how can I say, controversy? Like, there's a limit to the amount of, for example, German captains we can add to the game for reasons you can figure out on your own. So there's we still have the limit of some kind of copyright because we're touching directly to a person that existed, and the way we depict them in the game, is it respectful enough? So there's a bit of a cautious line to take on the figures we can actually put in the game regarding this. So the answer would be yes, but we need to be careful about that as well, and it's not going to be on a massive scale. We will add more historical figures in the game, but don't expect like massive batches of them every update.
Daniel Hunter from Facebook is asking, after the German CV's nerfs, is there any other plans for nerfs or buffs to CVs, for example the Shikaku or the Lexington? As he says, the Lexington feels like it's way more powerful, and will a small nerf to the L fix this, or a small buff to the Shikaku so that we can have the nations on par?
I don't know how to tackle that question. There's going to be two perspectives here. There's going to be the development perspective, which we don't really have a clear vision of even as CM, and there's going to be what we push as feedback to the devs. Essentially, in the ideal world, what I would like to see regarding top tier CVs is kind of a flair per nation. For example, Shokaku having very strong torpedoes, Lexington having very strong HE bombs, Parsifal having very fast attack planes with AP bombs. So there's the balance, and there's also the community perception on it. Some people are going to prefer playing Shokaku, and they're going to come to us, hey, why are Shokaku HE bombs so bad? So we're going to be like, okay, maybe we should crank them up a bit. And then we're going to have Lexington players saying, hey, so we are kind of dancing on that line, because I really think, and I think the community should also know that the developers listen to the community with very open ears, and there's a list long, a very long list of changes and tweaks and balance and mechanics that have been added directly via community feedback and demands. So we also run into the issue where if we do that too much, we're going to be stuck in a way that if we don't respond to community feedback with instant reaction, we're going to get a whole bunch of frustration and so on and so forth. And the latest nerf to German CVs was, I think, the best example for it. There was also the matter of German CVs being a bit too strong with the AP bombs and dropping battleships, mostly battleships, for like 30k salvo. So that had to be toned down from data. So we had both the player perspective and perception, and we also had the data. When we have these two, most of the time, and I'm actually not gonna say most, but all the time, it's going to change. Like, we're gonna act on that. So it's like these changes are gonna highly depend on, first of all, the data we have from these ships, and second of all, the perception and the feedback the community gives. But one thing to realize is that these two things go hand to hand. If we have very poor community perception, but the data shows that the ship is performing well because the majority of the players who play the ship make the ship work, let's take the example of Siegfried or Azuma, we are not going to change these ships because the feedback we take are from a relatively minority of players who want the ship to work in a specific way, whereas the rest of the player base who are not maybe as vocal are making the ship work correctly, and we have data to show it. The average damage is on the same par with other cruisers and yada yada yada. So, you know, it is a difficult line to walk on.
Slithery Spy from Facebook. Des Moines when? And I'm also eager for this answer.
Des Moines when? Well, Des Moines was already into the game. No, there's a current meme right now on our Discord saying that every time somebody asks for Des Moines, we will move it a few days on the calendar. I can't say if Des Moines will ever arrive. I really want that ship to come in Legends, for sure. It is one of my most played ship on PC. It is one of my favorite ship on PC. And I mean, I don't want to say it's guaranteed that the ship will come. But there's very high chances it does. It's a ship that existed, that got produced. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't come to the game eventually. Currently, there's no plans. But also, the small concern I would have with Des Moines specifically is that it is such a popular ship on PC that if we implement it to Legends, first of all, we would have to tone it down a little bit. Because people complain about Wichita being too strong, and then they're asking for Des Moines. So there's this kind of question mark, like, okay, are we ready to add a cruiser that can bounce virtually half of the caliber at tier 7 and legendary tier, and that is able to spit out super heavy AP every 5.5 seconds, on top of the fact that with the right commander build, you could probably get Des Moines down to 3.5 second reload or something. Like, it would be insane. So there's this thin line to add, like maybe add a few more powerful ships before we add a Des Moines, which essentially, let's be real, Des Moines would be absolutely hilariously broken if we did not nerf it. And then if we add Des Moines in a nerfed manner, people will go absolutely ballistic, because we're changing a ship that is extremely renowned and we're not making it as strong as it is seen or perceived on PC. So, you know, it's a catch-22, basically. But hey, future may hold surprises. I'm not confirming anything, of course, but I wish Des Moines was here, of course, naturally.
Roger Schonstadt from Facebook. When can we have ships with more mods or equipment swaps? For example, a BB that can swap heal for a radar, etc. or more commander ranks or skills?
So I can't really say no. The number one limit I think of when it comes to more mod would be once again keybind. I'm guessing he also wants to include consumables in there. We only have 4 keys for consumables. Technically only 3, because one is always bound to a damage control. So technically we only have 3 buttons for consumables. And then equipment swap, having, for example, as you said, battleships swapping heals for radars and so on and so forth. It is a rough idea. It is a rough idea because consumables, of course, are powerful. A radar is extremely powerful against DDs, and we also want to maintain that basic principle of rock, paper, scissors. If any battleship at high tier is able to swap heal for radar, first of all, it may not be historically accurate for most of the history nuts around, and second of all, gameplay wise, it would throw a wrench into everything. Battleships would be able to easily counter destroyers, which they're not quite supposed to. It would mess around a whole bunch of stuff regarding balance wise. So swapping consumables when it makes sense, for example, I don't know, I'm making a big example here, but Khabarovsk being able to swap smoke for heal, it works because for its intended purpose, Khabarovsk come with issues. It's a very big target. It has very poor concealment. So if he wants to go all in, might as well give it a heal. Same would actually be possible for Tashkent. I wish Tashkent at tier 7 could already emphasize on that specific thing. Like, hey, if you want to go full gunboat, you have that possibility of sacrificing safety for basically being able to tank more damage. But when it doesn't make sense, like swapping a repair party, which is kind of inherent to battleships, to a radar, it doesn't quite make sense gameplay-wise. So it wouldn't be logic to do in my book. So essentially, no.
Well, the other question you asked was more commander ranks and or skills. Of course, and you kind of touched on the skill basics of it. So maybe look at the ranks. Is there a possibility that they can have more ranks in these commanders?
I don't think so. At least I've never heard of any plans for this. I'm gonna refer to something I've just seen just recently. It's a YouTuber that mostly focuses on PC. His name is Potato Quality, and he made a few videos recently regarding legends, and he talked about the commander thing. And it's kind of something I've forgotten personally, because I know at the beginning when the title released, there was a lot of topic about commanders being extremely grindy, and it would take a lot of time to bring up a commander to a rank where the skills would start to have a viable effect, and so on and so forth. So when you talk about new additions and more ranks and more skills, you always, as a developer or as a CM, when you have an insight on the game, you always have to take into account a new player perspective. We have new players coming in the game every day. We have new players starting from scratch. The people who ask for more stuff like this, they've already been through that grind, they've been over it, they've unlocked the vast majority of what they wanted to unlock, and now they're asking for more, which is completely valid. But at the same time, we can't do it because a new player who comes in the game, I would say, would already be overwhelmed by the current commander system. Wow, there's like, I don't know, 150 commanders, and they each, every single one of them, need that amount of resource and that amount of ground to bring at a level where they'll actually be impactful to your ship. So you always have to keep new player perspective in mind, not to completely scare them off with a massive grind. And that's exactly what this YouTuber said. He started playing Legends, and he said that the only thing he didn't quite like about the game was the extremely grindy commander system. So adding more skills and adding more ranks, I mean, more skills kind of goes to, like, it's kind of logic. If we add more commanders, there'll probably be new skills coming in with them. So new skills is okay because they're not quite tied to the ranking system. They're just a choice within a tree. Whereas more ranks requires more resource, requires more playtime, requires more grinding. So more skills, possibly. More ranks, extremely unlikely for all the above mentioned reasons.
The last time we started talking about having this podcast, we had a small little discussion, and you said there's a possibility you might have an exclusive information for us. Would you mind sharing some of that exclusive information?
I almost forgot about it. Thank you for reminding me.
I will never forget. Exclusive.
I almost dodged a bullet here.
As big or small?
I would have been slapped in my fingers. It's it is a rather small one, but some people may consider it big. In the past, probably 5 to 6 months, the topic is also still on the rails. I'm gonna make it as long as possible to really keep you on edge. I love that.
So you want to kill me?
That topic kind of haunted us because the players had actually a point. It was true that we were lacking this specific thing for a long time, and that's a tier 7 global XP destroyer. We have a request for it for a long time. We've only had one tier 7 destroyer campaign. That was the Yudachi a few months ago, and that was about it. There's not that many tier 7 premium destroyers. Actually, I can only count, well, one. That's Yudachi. With the rest being legendary DDs, which don't really quite count because they're not premium. They are legendary. So we've said in the past that there was going to be, in the future, global XP DDs coming in the game. And that will happen on the next update. You will have a tier 7 global XP destroyer coming in the next update. The update right after that one. So here we go. That's the big announcement.
What nation it's from?
I cannot say neither nation, neither type. If it's a gunboat destroyer or a torpedo boat, this is It is a destroyer. It goes pew pew, and it will be available for Global XP. And of course, since it is available for Global XP,
Wonderful.
it is a premium DD.
Well, thank you so much, Robin.
So there you have
That's wonderful news, and I believe the community will be very happy with
No
that
problem.
information. Even I am happy and excited already.
I hope they will. It is a big tease, but at least now they have an ETA. They knew that the Tier 7 Global XP DD was going to come at some point, but at least now they can put a timer on that and expect it to come on
You
the
guys
next
heard
update.
it. Start saving up that global XP, and when you start reporting things, give detail. That's what the guys need from more gaming. Robin,
Yes.
from my side, from Papa's side, we would like to thank you for coming aboard and assisting us with all these difficult questions that the community had to have an answer for, and that you've given. And I would like to say from my bottom of my heart, thank you for coming, and I hope to have you in the future as well. Again.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure. I'm aware that we overextended on the timer here. I'm sorry about that. So props to you guys for running this podcast. I sincerely hope that you'll have a proper audience, and what I will try to do, since this announcement is quite important, and since the previous podcast as well, including players or other members of Wargaming, should get a bit more vision. So thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, until the next one. Alright guys, from me, RoguePLC, I'm out. I'll see you in the next one.